Good morning, good morning. Thank you for still coming to our gathering on Super Bowl Sunday. You made it. If we ever got a chance to meet, my name's Bryce. I serve as one of the pastors here on staff. I help with some of our leadership development, some of our formation, and yeah, we're just really glad that you're here. I see a couple new faces and a couple friends that I know that are showing up today, so thanks for being here. This last week, we started this new series called Hunger and Thirst, and it's one of those themes that I like. It's not just because I'm a bit of a foodie and love a good meal, but I think that the frame, hunger and thirst, it does a really good job of helping us rethink, or just a fresh way to think about our relationship with God. It's one thing to say, I believe in God. It's another thing to say, I hunger and thirst for God. It's different, right? It's one thing to say, I'm a Christian. I like reading my Bible sometimes, even maybe in a coffee shop and people will give me weird looks. Or I want to be a part of a faith community. It's another thing to say, I hunger and thirst for God. Different things. And so this series, I think it does a great job of just, in some ways, in kind of a sneaky way, like bringing to the surface some of the desires of our heart and some of what's happening inside, on the inner, in our inner reality. I think that Jesus does this very well. Jesus is a master at having conversations with people that go deeper. And I think that for majority of us, we want to live life with meaning, right? We want to have like deep, meaningful lives. But in order to do that, we actually have to go deep. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable and that can be difficult and that can be scary because it's kind of a place that feels unknown. So this series is all about growth. It's all about trying to move from a place of maybe plateau with God or apathy with God to go deeper, to say, no, I'm a person who hungers and thirsts for God. One of the things that I get excited and gassed up about this series is just because when I look out at our community, we have a group of people at our church who, there's some genuine people that really are hungry and thirsty for God. People that want to love Him, want to love people. The amount of stories that you hear of what God is doing in people's lives, through people's lives. I don't know if you realize who you're sitting next to in some sense. This is a community that is genuine in trying to go, I really want to live this thing out. I really want to grow in my hunger and thirst for God. So my heart, my excitement, my favorite thing in life is to come alongside people and go like, get it. Go, keep going, let's go. And kind of just like fan the flame. So today is that. You're probably, you're going to notice some of these scriptures. You're going to maybe have heard some of what I've shared before. But ultimately, my heart is that you would just walk away with a little bit more confidence in going, yeah, I want to hunger and thirst for God. And the question that I'm trying to answer, really what I'm trying to do this morning, the theme is to answer the question, so how do we grow in our hunger for God? How do we grow in our hunger for God? If it's easy to live on autopilot, if it's easy to not go deeper, how do we begin to cultivate this hunger for God? The verse that we ended with, Jacob, thanks for reading, man. Love what you're doing upstairs. His parents are here. It's awesome. Welcome, guys. 1 John 4:19. This is where the passage ended. This is the whole crux of the message, okay? So simple. You're gonna hear this over and over and over again. And I hope that the more you hear it, the more it begins to sink in a little bit. But this is the thought. We love because He first loved us. We love because He first loved us. So how do we grow in our hunger for God? Part of how we grow in our desire for Him is we grow in the understanding of His desire for us. That's the whole point. Part of how we grow in our hunger for God is we grow in the understanding of His desire for us. Said a different way, catching the heart of God helps us hunger and thirst for God. Catching the heart of God helps us hunger and thirst for God. When I begin to understand how God looks at me, as Pastor Tyler was talking about, it begins to shape how I begin to look at Him. To begin to hunger for God is to begin to understand the desire that He has for us. The beginning of the passage, 1 John 4:16, it starts with a bomb here. I want this to be more and more true of my life. Can you say that this is true of your life? 1 John 4:16. And we have come to know and believe the love that God has for us. And we have come to know and believe the love that God has for us. How confidently can you say that you know the love that God has for you? How much is that in your core? How much is that in your identity? How much is that in your being? That God genuinely loves me. And not just to know and believe in the sense of like ascribing to some cognitive idea. Like a cold hard fact, check. I think that all of us, probably all of us in this room, maybe not, will be able to say like, yeah, I know God loves me. But I think there's also a piece of us that has this sneaking suspicion that, I don't really know if God likes me. Like he's like looking at me with a smile, but beneath that, it feels like he's slowly getting a little more irritated with me. He's slowly like, his patience is wearing thin with me. At times, I really feel like that. So how can we grow in being able to say, I have come to know and believe the love that God has for us? Not just this, I believe it, but really I'm living into that. Gerald May talks about this type of knowing, psychiatrist, theologian. This type of knowing is different than just, I know it in my head. It's more of like that heart moment. It's a knowing that grows within one's heart and directs the very substance of one's life. It's not just endorsing a fact, it's like in me, it's moving me, it's motivating me, it's changing me, it's actually shaping my life. How much can you say that you are confident in God's love towards you? That God genuinely looks at you and says, I want the best for that person, I care about that person. I want to be the type of person that grows more and more into that. Is this our lived experience? Said another way, are we present to the love of God? When you think about your relationship and you walking into this place and you watching or singing along as we're worshiping, how connected are you? How present are you to the love that God has for you? For me, part of my story is I started out in my journey with God. And I would say the flavor, the theme it had a lot more to do with obligation. I started as a kid going to a Catholic school. My parents put me in Catholic school. There were some positives to that. There were some negatives to that. Some of the negative was I knew that God was real. He was out there. He was watching. And I felt like I didn't have a lot of devotion in my heart. I didn't understand the cross at all. I didn't understand love that he had for me. It was like, he's out there. He's watching. I should probably do what they're saying. It was a lot more of an obligation rather than a genuine desire and drive in my heart for a devotion for God. As I started to get older, I started to love things more than I loved God. Funny how that works. All of a sudden, God, like in my childhood, was kind of just a rule book and morals and something that it's a way of being, but like it's a worldview. I don't know. Maybe I think I should go after these other things. I started to get really passionate about sports, which is not a bad thing at all. Athletics were my thing. But in that, I started to get into this scene, and I've said this a lot because this is a part of the testimony and the glory of Christ in my life, is I got into the party scene. And so by the time that I was a senior in high school, I was a full-blown drug addict using almost every day. And that was like my life. Nobody really knew it because I was still doing sports. By the time that I graduate from high school, the summer before I go into college, I have a drug overdose. Most terrifying moment of my life. I'm driving in the car. I'm literally like my body's shaking. I thought I was having a heart attack. It shattered my whole everything, my whole worldview. Whoa, the decisions that I make matter. Whoa, death is very real. Death to me is a very real thing. I thought that night I was going to meet Jesus, and it was very scary. I was having thoughts in my head like, you should say bye to your friends. And it shifted. It shifted a lot. But as I begin to move past that, coming out of the hospital, it was like, I need to get my life together. Whoa, God's real. I almost just met him. I should probably figure out, what do I believe? What should I do about this? And that season of my life became defined a lot by punishment avoidance. I better start doing the right things because I don't want anything bad to happen to me. I don't want to go to hell. Whoa, this is terrifying. And it was a lot more about, I'm going to do good so that bad doesn't happen to me. And yet God's there, he's in the mix, but like it's more about me making sure to kind of appease God and in some ways get God off of my back so that like when I see him, we're going to be good. It was more about punishment avoidance. In that season of my life, God broke through in a profound way, speaking to me personal in different ways about his great love. About the fact that he genuinely loves me, that he's got an identity for me, power for me. He can deal with my past. He can help me in my present. He can help me with my future, breaking through some of this fear of punishment. But then, because I'm a mixed bag, because I'm very imperfect, because I have a heart that needs Jesus, I jumped into ministry through his calling, but then ministry slowly became the thing for me of maybe that can be the defining factor of my life. Maybe that can be the thing where I find my greatest sense of significance and worth. Maybe I actually, even though I don't want to admit it, then maybe I love ministry and the success of ministry more than I love God. Slowly. And Jesus in this season of my life, and really all three of these are in different parts of my heart in different days, but go with me. In this part, he became more of like this self-help support. I'm going to go to God and he's going to help me pursue my dream. He's my self-help guru. He's going to kind of help me do what I want to do with my life. And it's ministry, so he's asked me to do that. So maybe, but it was more about the ministry than it was about him. And the reason I share this is because the more I journey with Jesus, in his kindness, in his goodness, in his love, he keeps inviting me personally back into what I would call loving union, where the theme of life with God is past obligation, past punishment avoidance, past him just trying to make my life better, and into this place of loving union with him. And I believe that is the invitation for me. It is the invitation for you. It is the invitation for this church and for our city. So this is what I'm trying to invite us into, to invite us to remember. And I just want to raise the stakes for a moment, that I believe in many ways that your future depends on you knowing yourself genuinely loved by God. Your future depends on you knowing yourself genuinely loved by God. This matters so much. Why does this matter? Because if I don't understand he loves me, I won't listen to him. And so much of the journey with God is learning to listen to what he has to say and step into it. At its simplest form, that's what it is. And if I don't know him and his heart, whatever he has to say to me, even if it could be the greatest thing, it won't land and it won't stick because I don't really know what he's like. I don't really know his heart. I don't really know if he has my best interest. This is why the truth is that when you hear his heart, it changes how you hear his word. When you hear his heart, it changes how you hear his word. This matters so much. And what if we could become a people that much more, that we're so confident in the love of God, that no matter what he had to say to us, we knew that pure love was just streaming towards us through his word. That would be life-changing. That would be life-changing. And that's the journey of the Christian life. More and more growing in the knowledge and the understanding of his desire for you. And in doing so, it creates desire for him. And it's this beautiful relationship. So how do we grow? How do we get there? Now, again, what I'm trying to do in this moment is I'm just trying to remind you for the next however long, hopefully it's not super long. I know you guys got plans. To remind you of God's love for you, his desire for you. So that's what the passage was. We're going to break down some pieces of it, and then we're going to respond. And the hope is not that you just hear a thought or you hear something that you go, I've heard this before, but that you genuinely allow it to move you into a place of connection and conversation with God. That's the point of this time. It's not to be entertained. It's not to hear something that you've never heard or have your ears like, oh, that's nice. It's to really try to connect with him. That's the point. So in that passage that Jacob read, verse 16, is this phrase. You ready? Here we go. God is love. God is love. Now, I don't know if you've seen like a cliche mug or shirt recently. God is love. A lot of times this phrase is used to try to justify people's life however they want to live. It doesn't matter how I live because God is love. In context, notice for a second, it does not say that God is loving, but that God himself is love. God is love. There's a difference there. So think about this for a moment. Imagine that somebody created a headset. It looked like a goggles. Just imagine for me for a second, just go with me. Maybe it's like sometime in the future, but just imagine. No, it's like, I was a little bit nervous putting this up because I was a little nervous somebody was going to show up with one of these on today. I was like, who's going to be the first preacher that's up here speaking with those on? Tyler? I mean, that's going to be, no, I'm just kidding. Tyler would not do that. Imagine there was a headset that somebody created, and in that there was an app, okay? You could use this app to go back in time, which would be cool. You could use this app to be able to watch history play out. Imagine that you could go so far back in time that you were able to see the point where nothing existed except God himself. What would you see? What was God like before he created the world? It's really interesting to think about, and in so many ways, it should shape how we see God. God is love. What does that mean? A.W. Tozer reminds us of this by saying, hey, we're prone to forget that at one point God lived and dwelt and existed and loved without support, without help, and without creation. What was God like before creating the cosmos? Jesus, of all the claims that he makes, and there's some big ones. He's king, big one. He's Savior, he's Lord, he's Messiah, big one. The fact that Jesus claimed to have existed before creation, that's a claim. We see this in the scriptures. That Jesus, the Word of God, was already with God, the Father, when he began to create the universe. We learn that Jesus and his Father shared a glorious existence before the world existed, John 17. That the Father loved the Son before the foundation of the world, John 17. That in the beginning was the Spirit. The Spirit was hovering over the waters. So in the beginning, Father, Son, Spirit, God, living in a type of glorious harmony. God is love. Not just God is loving, God is love. Go with me for a second. One pastor, preacher, writer, he kind of broke it open by honestly breaking my mind for a second. I've shared this quote before, but I think it's just so helpful. This is Dr. Darrell Johnson. He says, think about it. At the center of the universe is a relationship. Father, Son, Spirit. At the center of the universe is a community. At the center of the universe is an intimacy, a deep, abiding, tender, affectionate belonging. In his book, Experiencing the Trinity, he breaks down the three basic Trinitarian truths which emerge from God's self-revelation. You know this. Number one, there is one God and only one God. But that this God not only exists, but exists eternally in three distinct persons. The three persons are equally divine in essence and attributes. The trick is to hold all three at the same time. Much of the early church heresy they would try to hold two and they let go of the other. This is a helpful little diagram. Notice the is not is. The Father is God. The Son is God. The Spirit is God. But also the Father is not the Son. There's a distinctiveness there. Distinct persons. Now, this is a profound mystery. And can we just say for a second, if human beings were trying to make up God, we probably could have made it a little bit easier on ourselves just to think about it. But think about this. For all of eternity, God is love. The Father, the Son, the Spirit. And think about the quality of that divine dance. Probably pretty good. The Father, the Son, the Spirit. Probably pretty good. Tim Keller said it like this. He said, think about this. I love this. If you find somebody you adore, I know Valentine's Day is coming. You got your eyes now. If you find somebody you adore, someone for whom you would do anything, and you discover that this person feels the same way about you, does that feel good? It's sublime. That's what God has been enjoying for all eternity. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit are pouring love and joy and adoration into the other, each one serving the other. They are infinitely seeking one another's glory, and so God is infinitely happy. Wow. So if God is so happy, why did he create anything at all? That's what is astounding if you really begin to let it settle in and think about it. What God created is actually unnecessary. Not that it is not valuable. God didn't need to create it. He was perfectly fine in and of himself. The Father, the Son, the Spirit, eternally happy forevermore. So what happened? Why would God create anything? I love how one author puts it by saying, well, the fountain of love brimmed over. The Father, the Son, the Spirit in love, God in love, brimmed over and created. That's the point of creation. Creation itself is an overflow of love. God doesn't need humanity. God doesn't need the cosmos. God doesn't need anything that we could give him. He is fine in and of himself. He's perfectly happy. And in that happiness decided to share life with us. That is what creation is all about. And when we begin to look out into creation, we begin to see this overflow of love. Think about it for a second. Why would you create an estimated 8.7 million species? Why not just create a couple? Because the fountain of love brimmed over. Why would God create the human eye to be able to distinguish between 7 and 10 million colors? Of all the different hues, of all the different shades. Why? Why not just create one color? Because the fountain of love brimmed over. Why create taste buds? Why create the ability to have children? Why create that an enjoyable experience? Why not just drop pills and then he could have done it any way that he wanted to. But why? Because he wanted to share life, because the fountain of love brimmed over. That is creation in and of itself. So now, let's ask the question. So in that then, does God love you? The big picture, if you zoom all the way out, the fact that God created out of love and the fact that you exist out of an overflow of his love is a result of the reality that you are loved. Because you exist means you're loved, because God made you out of love. Now, that feels a little philosophical and a little meta, kind of big picture, but that's exactly what it is. In the beginning, God said it was good. That he created out of love. You as creation are a result of that. So are you loved? Well, you're created out of love, so yeah, you're loved. So that's the baseline of the story. Now, when we zoom in and we begin to look at Jesus, Colossians and Hebrews talk about Jesus is the image of the invisible God. So when we want to know what's that invisible God really like, we begin to see better, more clearly through Christ. Hebrews 1:3 says that the Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact expression of his nature. I love that phrase. He's the exact expression of his nature. If we want to know what God is like, we look to Christ, because Christ is fully God. So when we begin to look at then the heart of Christ, what do we begin to see? Matthew 11, this is Jesus's self-description. He self-identifies and talks about what's actually happening in the inner reality, in the epicenter of his life, that's actually motivating him, driving him. Is he just kind of looking at us? He's kind of like a robot, doesn't have any feeling, he's kind of just doing the right thing because he's holy. What's actually happening in there, Jesus? And Jesus, as he peels back in Matthew 11, he says this. He says, hey, what's going on the inside is that I want everyone to come to me. Come to me all. What does all mean? Everyone. Everyone. Come to me all. Everyone. And what's the prerequisite? Anyone who's in pain. Anyone who's struggling. Anyone who's got weariness or feel burden. Okay, I'll sign up for that. That sounds good. Why? Because I want to give you rest. Why? Because I want you to take my yoke, my way of life, and I want you to learn from me. Why? Because beneath all of it, what's happening in my heart is I am lowly and humble. Jesus in this moment, he didn't say that he was reluctant or that he was resentful. He didn't say he was harsh or critical or easily irritated. He didn't say he was smug, indifferent, holier than thou. Rather, he shows that the posture of his heart is a heart of accessibility and approachability, humility and lowliness. The God of the universe. We see this play out in Jesus' life. We see this twice in Matthew when he looks upon the crowd. What does he see when he looks into the crowd? I mean, there's people in the crowd like you and me, people that don't have their life together. People that are struggling, people that got some stuff that they're not opening up about, and everybody's battling in some way. I mean, it's a crowd of people. It's normal people. It's not just because it's in the Bible that it's not real people. And what happens? He looks out into the crowd, and what wells up in his heart? Compassion. Man, I want to help. I want to help. Approachability, humility, gentleness. This is the heart of God. We see twice in the Gospels, 2 times it says that Jesus cries. Think about those 2 times when Jesus cries. The 2 times that he cries, the 2 times that he's in agony are because of the agony of others. The tears come up because he's seeing tears in others. Once he's looking at Jerusalem and he's seeing everything that's happened and he's just heartbroken, starts crying. Another time he sees his friend has just died. He's got a plan to raise him from the dead mere moments later, and yet he is standing fully present in the pain, recognizing the pain of death. Even though he has a plan, death still has a sting, and it is nasty, and it is painful, and it is difficult, and he cries. Jesus, the 2 times he cries are because of other people. One of the prophetic identity markers of the Messiah is that in Isaiah it says that he will be a man of sorrows. Jesus was just that. Jesus had sorrow, struggle, difficulty, but the 2 times he cries is because of others. This is the heart of Christ. This is why he self-identifies in the scriptures as the great physician. People are criticizing him. People are going, really, Jesus? Why are you hanging out with those people? Don't you get it? I thought that you were a holy teacher, Messiah guy. What's the deal? Why are you spending time with them? And Jesus says, you don't get it. I'm actually more like a doctor showing up to heal the sick. So I got to hang out with the sick. We forget that that's actually his heart, is to heal the parts of us that we don't want other people to see, and the parts of life where we're struggling. That's his heart towards us. I was reading recently, and one author gave this illustration. I think it's really helpful. But imagine for a moment that there was a group of people, and they were struggling with this sickness. It was ruining their community. There was nothing they could do about it. Struggling. They couldn't heal themselves. There was no remedy. They were just alone. And in that, this doctor discovered a remedy, discovered a way to help heal the situation. Begins to, in this excitement, go to this community and say, hey, I got something that's going to help with that. But in that moment, there's tension. There's this moment of mistrust. I don't know, can you really help me? I don't know if you have my best interest. I don't really know. And there's even some, in the community, there's even some pride. Like we want to heal ourselves. We don't really want somebody else to heal us. And in this moment of courage, these children jump up and begin to run to the doctor because they just don't feel good. And they begin to run to the doctor to receive healing. In that moment, what do you think is in the heart of the doctor? Joy. That's why the doctor arrived. Why do we think it's any different with Christ? His joy and desire is to be the great physician, to be a healer. He wants to help. He's the one who called himself a doctor, a soul doctor. He wants our struggle, our pain. We so forget this, but it actually brings him joy. Thomas Goodwin, the Puritan preacher, the author of The Heart for Christ, he says this. He says, Christ's own joy, comfort, happiness, and glory are increased and enlarged by his showing grace and mercy in pardoning, relieving, and comforting his members here on earth. You ever thought about that? Another author, in reflecting on this, commenting on this, says, When you come to Christ for mercy and love and help in your anguish and perplexity and sinfulness, you are going with the flow of his own deepest wishes, not against them. Man, the heart of Christ. Jesus wants us to come to him in an undefended state like a child with vulnerability saying, can you help me? Can you help me? And this is not just at the beginning of your journey with Jesus. This is not an altar call. Hey, let's try to invite people that have never followed Jesus in your life. This is your whole journey with Jesus. Having a posture where you understand how loved you actually are and you understand the heart of Christ and you over and over and over again come to the great physician saying, Dad, I need help. I need help. This is the journey. This is it. Understanding more and more how loved you are and bringing yourself to him out of that love. This is why Hebrews 12:2 says, for the joy that lay before him, for the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. What is the joy that lay before him? You. Part of the joy of Jesus enduring the cross is that he could get what he's wanted from the beginning. He's wanted to share life. He created to share life out of the overflow of the Father, the Son, the Spirit. So he's getting what he's wanted from the beginning, you. That's the desire of God. Sometimes we forget that the point of forgiveness is a vehicle into relationship. Sometimes we think that forgiveness is this cold-hearted machine-like thing that God just dispenses to us. The whole point of forgiveness is relationship. God just doesn't want to forgive you. He actually wants to live life with you for all of eternity into the new creation. That's his desire. Why? Because God is love. From the beginning, God's been love. And God's wanted to share that love and that life with humanity. Because he is love. The Father, the Son, the Spirit. So think about it. On the cross, Jesus is not acting inconsistent. He didn't all of a sudden just like flip the love switch on. He's acting consistent to who he's always been for all of time. Because God is love. The Father, the Son, the Spirit, perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Sharing life, the cross is just another expression of who God has been forever and who God will be forevermore. So when we allow this to begin to sink in, it begins to bring freedom because we think that we need to earn God's love. We think that we need to convince God and persuade God of our worth. But God is already convinced of our worth. God already loves us, and it is grounded and rooted in his nature because God is love rather than the scale of how lovable we are. So there's the freedom. That's the freedom. When I begin to recognize that it's not about how lovable, how well did I do, but rather who is God, all of a sudden the love is there because it's more about him than it is about me. This is the good news of God. This is the good news of Jesus Christ. We see this on the cross. We see this in Christ. Romans 5:8, probably my favorite passage. But God, you know it, but God proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This is not for the person who doesn't yet know Jesus. This is for you. Think about it for a second. Sin, ultimately, if you break it down at its core, it is saying to God, God, I wish you were dead. That's the intensity of it. I want to be my own God. I don't want to do what you want me to do. I want to live life in my own wisdom, by my own means. I want to be my own God. That's the core of it. That's the heart of it. And with that, what does it say? That while we were in this place, while we had this posture, while we were saying to God, God, I want you dead, Jesus arrived, gave his life for us and said, but I want you. And is there anything that we could really give God that he doesn't have? I mean, relationship, us. And that's what he's desired forever. That's what he will desire forever. That's his thing. He wants to share life. So we get to this place where it's like, does God really love me? Is he really? Yes. Can I just say it plainly? Yes, he really does love you. If God can love us while we're in this state, farthest from him, that in our worst, he can give us his best, why do you keep fumbling in your mind? And I wrestle with this too, I'm with you. But man, the enemy just gets in there and begins to accuse. And the way in which that person has treated me, and now I'm thinking about, oh, maybe God's more like that person than who God actually is. And it's this wrestle and this struggle of, man, I don't know if God really likes me. I don't know if God's really for me. No. Look to the scriptures. Remind your soul that God is love. And that is unchanging. That is concrete. He is for you and he loves you. He genuinely loves you. This is why Paul in Romans 8 asks this rhetorical question: who can separate us from the love of God? And then he answers, nothing. Nothing. So I see some people like sitting with it. I really want to encourage whatever's coming up and you're like, but I bet you could pray and wrestle with or talk with somebody if you wanted to. I bet you could begin to work some of that out in such a way where you're able to say that much more, oh, I'm confident actually that God does love me. And that's the beauty of journeying in community, because some people it's like, I don't know. But this is the truth, that God loves you and that there's nothing you can do about it, really. Even today, Jesus, the risen King, the great high priest, sits on the throne next to the right hand of the Father. And in Hebrews 4, what does it say? You know the scripture. We got a high priest who's not unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way. God knows your pain. God knows what you're going through. God knows what you're experiencing because he himself has experienced it. And then what? Therefore, let's approach him. Come to me, all who weary and are burdened. It's the same message. Even though Christ is exalted at the right hand of the Father as the high priest, it's the same Christ. He is still as accessible today as he was when he walked the earth. He's unchanging. Why? Because God is love. So we begin to desire him more when we begin to understand his desire for us. That's where hunger comes. Because I love because he first loved me. I'm going to invite the band up to close. And this is the last point here, just a great invitation. This is all great news, right? The gospel, good news. But in that, please recognize that Christ is inviting you into relationship. So his love for you is concrete, steady, and firm. But he's inviting you to reorder your whole life around relationship with him. And just like any relationship, that's going to change some things for you. You're going to make some different decisions. You're going to make some different lifestyle choices. Just like any relationship, any good friendship. And my commitment to my wife, right? As I'm committing to her and saying, yes, we're going to be in this relationship together moving forward. That's going to change me and my decisions and what I'm doing. It's the same with Jesus. So he's inviting you to receive his love and to begin to reorder your life around it. And when you can begin to hear his heart, it begins to shape how you hear his word. And when you begin to hear his word and you step into that, reordering your life around his love, that's when life starts to change. But this is the journey. This is the wrestle. Because it takes trust. It takes surrender. And that's scary. It really is. I recently was on vacation with my wife. We went to Joshua Tree. I don't know if you have been before. It's a national park, super chill, cool hiking. We went for the sun. We were like, we got to get out. We got to get sunshine, please. It was 65. It felt like it was 85. I was like, thank you, Jesus. It was awesome. But one of the evenings, we made this plan. We're like, all right, tomorrow we're gonna do this adventure as a family. It's gonna be so fun. We were like, we always do the whole Google thing where it's like, what's the best thing to do? So we're doing all that. And we found these dunes that were about an hour away from the Airbnb that we were staying at. We're like, all right, this is gonna be fun. Our little boy's gonna run around. Maybe he'll slide down the hill, it'll be awesome. He likes the sand, he likes the beach, this would be great. So we're getting excited. We look at the weather app, it says, okay, it's supposed to rain. All right, from Seattle, okay, little rain, don't hurt nobody, we're good. This is the Southwest, so it's a little different. We wake up the next day. My boy always wakes up way too early, 5:30, we're up, 6 o'clock, we're like, oh my gosh. Okay, so we're getting all the breakfast ready, we're getting to the car. I go out to the car, and as I'm walking out to the car, I hear this voice. And the voice goes, hey, you going somewhere today? And I was like, hello, Jesus? Like, hello? I was like, what? And I look up, and the neighbor is like peeking over the fence, like really kind of creepy, like just looking over and like just his nose. And I'm like, hello? Yes, okay. Hi. Yeah, we're going somewhere today. Back in the car. He goes, you know what? I work for the weather service, and we're supposed to have some rain today. And so, I probably wouldn't go anywhere. And I'm like, what? And I was like, yeah, we were thinking about going to the Kelso Dunes. And right when I said that, he was like, ooh, right through there, it gets really, the rain starts coming through, it floods really bad. So I walk into the house, and I'm in this tension, in this struggle. It's like, am I gonna believe this person? I'm just randomly at an Airbnb, and somebody told me that it's gonna flood. I'm not from the north, from the Southwest. I don't know. I don't even know if this person is being like, does he even work for the weather services? I have no idea. Does this person just trying to, we were pretty loud yesterday and hanging out in the backyard. My boy was just like yelling the whole day. Is he just kind of grouchy and he's like, don't drive anywhere, young man? I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know this person. I've never seen him before. I just look up and he's there. And now he's telling me, don't go have the fun that you planned. You know what? You should probably not go on your journey at all. And I'm wrestling in this moment. We ended up listening to him. It ended up raining. It flooded. The point is that we so do this with God. Does God really know what he's talking about? Does God's heart towards me really the best? I don't know. Maybe we should just go. Maybe we should just do it. Maybe we should just have fun. But God, when he is speaking to us, is always speaking with a heart of love. And when we begin to understand that, we begin to grasp that, man, that heart begins to fuel this hunger for I just want what you want for me. I want your dreams of me to become my dreams because I know you love me. That's the shift. That's the change. We love because he first loved us. And we begin to desire when we begin to understand his desire for us. So that's the point this morning. Simple. You've heard it before, but would you allow it to take you into a new place with God? Wherever you're at today, man, would you just hunger and thirst that much more for him? I'm going to stand. If you could please stand. Pastor Tyler's going to come up and pray for us and give us a little bit of directions for the close.
Man, what an amazing word. Thank you, Bryce. I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to just share some things that I think the Spirit has led us to. So right now, Father, I ask that as Pastor Bryce just tilled the soil of our often hard hearts, God, would you make your way in? And would your love just absolutely take hold of us? Would it shape us? Would it mold us? Would it challenge us and encourage us? You know what you want to say to each person in this room right now, God. And I just pray that some of these things that we are going to share just are confirmation of what you're nudging right now. Just bring things to mind, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.